the important thing for advanced musicians is this, what I call a chunking strategy. And I actually always joked that I was just going to write my call my practicing chapter Chunk It, and leave it at that. And by chunk it, I'm talking about both physical chunking strategies and mental chunking strategies, where we're creating these patterns and thinking of them like we're grabbing them kind of ahead of ourselves. And we can actually practice in such a way that encourages that exact thing. So, and this can be done through encouraging the students to do their own pattern seeking, to use fingerings to help make those patterns manifest, and to create meaningful units that are going to help them understand more quickly. We can also use chunking strategies to lead us into the complex gestures that are required in advanced repertoire. There's a rhythm chart that I like to use that aids facility, but also helps us learn to think ahead. And if you read my 5 things you might not know about practicing, I'm also going to talk a little bit about multitasking. And I just cannot stress enough how important it is at this level that the repetition that we're doing as advanced musicians is mindful. There are 2 risks with over-automaticity. One is that we get so far into autopilot that we're actually encouraging our minds to wander, which is the last thing that we want to do. There is also evidence that over-automaticity can lead to focal dystonia. It's like if you have too many repetitions, your brain actually can't keep track of how to get from point A to point B. And I compare it to having a handful of cooked spaghetti noodles in your hand and throwing it down on a table and trying to track the beginning of a noodle to the next to a noodle. This is a vast oversimplification of how the neurons in our brains work, but it is the brain has to find the pathway. And so if we've done it 1,000 times, it actually can lose track of where it's going next. Next slide, please. So pattern seeking and fingerings and meaningful units, these are really interrelated. And one of the things I don't have time for to talk about today, but there is a video on my YouTube channel, is about the importance of rule learning for teaching scales, arpeggios, and chord progressions. And if we teach them the fingering rules for these patterns and why they apply and how to figure out which ones apply, they're going to make much better fingering choices when they're in the practice room by themselves. It also is really helpful if we have efficient fingering. So if we have a passage work that's in E flat major and we can use that E flat major scale fingering, we already know how to play what we're looking at. We can also use it to help us form meaningful units. So in the next example, this from Beethoven's Tempest, I like this addition a lot because it only really has the fingerings that we need. So we need the 3, the 4 is a shift, the 4 is a shift, the 3 is a shift. We don't need this 4. I might white it out in the students' music. 4 is a shift, shift, shift. So those finger numbers are the only numbers that we need. And what happens is then we read this as one group, and this is a group, and this is a group, and this is a short group. I'm not crazy about 2-note groups, but sometimes we need them. So this kind of fingering in the music is really, really helpful. And I've become more and more of a fingering minimalist as I've worked on music, because now when I see a finger number, it's telling me something unexpected is happening. And if it's telling me something where my hand is already there, I've just distracted myself with unnecessary information. Another practice that encourages pattern reading is where we take a chunking practice and then have that lead to our gestures. So this next example is from Debussy's Pour le Piano, and this is quite a awkward spot where our hands are like this in each other's way. So we can actually practice with both hands blocked. And again, I don't write this out. I tell the students this is how I want them to practice, and they have to read it and make those blocks. So I'm dealing with this really tight position, and now I can break one hand and keep the other hand in chunks. And I would usually break the other, although this was really awkward in this one. Oops, sorry, I forgot. I'm supposed to be chunking the other one. And now I'm really in the way, because the broken octave actually can get my left hand out of my right hand's way. But this is a practice strategy that takes 10 seconds, but encourages the student to recognize the pattern and use that. And the thing is, then, if you have a little finger slip or a figuration mistake, it only lasts a millisecond. It's not catastrophic. So we have that structure to kind of come back home to, and it's really, really helpful. Another strategy I really like is this, the chart, and I learned this from Bonnie Blanchard at an MTNA conference, and I have found it to be incredibly helpful. So if we have a passage that has, say, 16 measures of 16th notes, or I use the example from the B minor sonata, which is pages of constant eighth notes, and we play either the whole passage or a significant section of it in each of these 9 rhythms. And we can't go on to the next rhythm until we've mastered, so we have technical and acoustical evenness in each iteration. It will help us find where any unevennesses are. And a lot of you already use what I call the long, short, 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 long, short, 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 long, and then short, long, short, 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 long. And that does move the grouping around, but it's always in a 4-note group. And I like this a lot because we have 4-note groups, then 5-note groups, then 6-note groups. So I play this. Etc. And then I do the next rhythm. And then I do the next rhythm, etc. So by the time I'm at the last rhythm, I'm on. And I find that to be really helpful because it will show me, say, so a lot of these will go really well, and then this one will be really hard, or this one will be really hard, because the hardest spot is now in the middle of the fast group. So it allows me to isolate where the difficulty is and work on fixing that one. And I like to alternate this with slow practice days, and then a chart day, and then a working up with the metronome day, and then a slow practice day, and then the chart day. And I have found that a couple times through the chart is really helpful. If it's new to your student, I recommend doing it with scales first. So again, they're taking something they already know to learn to do something new. So then all of this pattern learning and thinking ahead, and you'll find when you do this, you start using the long notes to think ahead through the next group of fast notes. And then when you go to start playing it as written, you realize you're thinking 3 or 4 notes ahead, and that's really, really helpful. And this leads me to my point about multitasking, which is that we actually use different parts of our brain to think, read, plan, or observe what we're going to play. And then that sends a signal to the motor command center. And while if we've rehearsed this motion well, we can be executing that motor command while we're thinking about the next thing. So this is where that repetition comes in, mindful repetition, but repetition, so that we learn that we can trust that our motor command will respond the way that we want it to. We can also use a similar kind of grouping, but this is what I call to the thumbs, which is a bit of a misnomer, because when we're going down in the right hand or up in the left hand, we're actually going to the note after the thumb. So we're finding where the cross is, and we're playing to that note evenly. So I play this, I think it, I play it, I play on the next group, I play on the next group, I play on the next group, play on the next group, play on the next group, etc. You'll also notice that I always started on the note I ended on because I don't want to practice in those gaps. But I am audiating, I'm mentally practicing the next section. So again, we're forming these patterns in a conscious way that's going to help us execute evenly. Another really helpful strategy for pattern learning is what I call scaffolding. And so this is really handy in something. There is an example on my YouTube channel with one of the slow movements from a Haydn sonata that's rhythmically very complicated. And if we practice just what's on the downbeats, and then just what's on beats 1 and 3, and then what's on 1, 2, 3, and 4, and then put in the filigree, we're learning that we're creating that constant structure. It also can help us in things like this example from the Beethoven Opus 14 number 1, because our two goals are that we're reading the chord structure and that we're phrasing. So if I practice 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, and then I put the figuration back in, that phrasing will persist. 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. So we call that hypermeter. And also, again, if we have a little finger slip in that figuration, it's not catastrophic because we know what chord we were heading to. So our takeaways for this level is that if the foundation is well laid, advanced repertoire becomes just the next logical step, that we can encourage our students' independence through thorough grounding in the fundamentals and consciously comparing the known to the new, and the importance of mindful repetition versus excessive repetition. And then, I don't know if you've heard about the book, Make It Stick. The deliberate, distributed, and interleaved practice comes from that book. So deliberate, we know what we want to accomplish, and we've thought about the best ways to do that. Distributed means we don't try to do it all at once. And interleaved means we spend some time on something and then we do something else, and then we come back to that something and then we spend time on something else. I always also recommend that we are very observant and non-judgmental in our practice. If we decide we're going to play something a certain way and then we play it that way we wanted to play it and it didn't work, if we observed what we got instead, we actually learn something that might be useful in a different situation, in a different piece, on a different piano, etc. So, kind of keeping our ego out of it and looking for our motivation to come from, trying different problem-solving strategies and noting progress is really important for us and for our students. The thing about this approach, pattern learning and chunking strategies, these provide anchors and encourage our practice to align with our mental processes. And then we can think about the same things when we're performing that we were thinking about when we were practicing. And if these experiences are well designed, then we know that we can trust it. And then we are following a well-known path while we're attending to what's going on around us and we're reacting to the piano or other instruments. Even differences in our own moods. I've played things in performance different than I've rehearsed them, and I know that I can trust that I know where I am and I'm not going to lose my place if I'm willing to experiment like that.